Because me saying you need to update 4,000 and your 4,000 is different than what I'm talking about.
Right.
So it really is an individualized thing, which is, yes, more time intensive, but we think at the end of the day, the right way to do it for the district.
Okay. And my other question has to do with, if we use your policy, or we use your procedure, your policies, then do you, technically speaking, become our legal counsel for the board in terms of when we, need an opinion about something? And do districts typically use you not only for legal counsel for the board, but also legal counsel for the district itself? And do some split that between firms? Is that
That's a fair question, and I apologize for what will be a convoluted answer in advance.
Yeah.
The first question of if we do policy for you, does that make us the de facto counsel for the Board of Education? The answer to that question is no, it does not.
Okay.
Okay. Do we often serve as general counsel? Yes. I mean, in many of the districts where we're already working, whether it's doing special ed work or student work or HR work or general counsel work, those are the boards that have asked us to come in and work on their policies. So we already have a relationship there. I guess the third part of your question is, are there boards that have used us for policy and then decide they want to use us for board work or other work within the district? Of course, that's the case. And we always welcome those opportunities and are happy to chat about them. But that's probably a little convoluted, but hopefully that covered the three questions.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Cook.
One more. You're talking on cutting down on a lot of the verbiage in some of them, but as an example, we have an administrative section, a professional staff section, a classified staff section, a student section. Each one of those sections has a weapons policy, which is almost identical other than a few words. Would you combine those into one policy? Would you keep them all separate? How do you handle situations like that?
We generally combine them, and that's a very common thing, and I know there's a service that generally does that for those different sections. And you're right, you could read those sections almost verbatim. They just change the word employee, they modify it a little bit. A weapons policy from this board, for example, to use your example, is the weapons policy for the board. It applies to staff, it applies to students, it applies to all of those categories. So we don't see the need to have that stated 3 times throughout a policy manual. A weapons policy is a weapons policy. And you see other similarities like that. I think discrimination is one where we often see that. And throughout the policy manual, we'll have the same declaration of anti-discrimination that reads exactly the same 3 or 4 times. It's good. It means we're really, really against discrimination, but it's not necessary. We could have one policy, one general policy that covers all those categories and indicated that its applicability is across the board. And so that's a very good example of sort of how these things expand in size. And I think, the intent is there. The intent is good when that happens, and we try to sort of subcategorize and break these things down. But at the end of the day, we think it has diminishing impact when you do it over and over and over again. So we generally combine.
Thank you.
Just generally, when we went, Mrs. Murphy and I were going to get your presentation, and one of the things she talked about is your policy manual ends up being like 40 to 60 pages or 40 to 80 pages, and your comment to that was that's something that the policy committee or the board could actually review on an annual basis instead of, our manual's about this big, and to get through all 9 sections by the time if you want one at a time, by the time you get back to the first one you did, it'd be a number of years. To me, that seems manageable in terms of us understanding better what our policies are.
Absolutely, and to speak to that, I all of the things I said in terms of the positive impact, but what you've just said, I think is a very practical reality, and it's a practical reality that most boards and most districts face. And as you come onto a board as a new member, and they hand you a binder that's 5.5 inches and say, this is your responsibility to understand. Let's be realistic. Even the most dedicated public servant is going to take some time to get through 400 pages and understand it. And what am I looking at? I think just the ability to shrink that down to a manageable size is so vital to be able to give a board member an opportunity, to give a member of the community who's interested in reading through and understanding your policies, the ability to do that in a way that really makes sense. I may have commented at the Metro Bureau session, I'll make the comment again. Usually when I come in with our baseline manual, which again is around 42 pages, I usually get one of 2 reactions. praise the Lord, hallelujah. It's not 450 pages anymore. We won't break our arm carrying it around. The other reaction I get is, oh my goodness, something must be missing. It's not possible that we went from 450 pages to 45 or 50. What's wrong? And it's so vital to talk about what we talked about in terms of, well, we've removed restatements of the law. We've removed administrative guidelines that don't need to be in there. We've taken out sort of the fluffy language, and we've really gotten down to policy. What really is policy, and that's what we've reflected in this manual. And as I'm proud to say that we've always get converts. For those that are scared at the beginning, something must be wrong, I've always been able to convert them all as we've worked through the process, and I show them that matrix, policy by policy. This is where it went. It's not gone. It's in here. It's like ragu's pasta sauce. It's still in there, okay? Trust me, it's in there. And this is where it went, and this is how we changed it. Or this is how we adopted it. Or I grabbed your language and I added that sentence, but now the policy, instead of being 4 paragraphs, is 4 lines. But it still does the same thing. But yes, the manageability aspect of it is huge, and I don't want to slash just to slash, and I don't want to make it short just to make it short, and we want to reflect, again, the district priorities. So that's why I say some of them end up being 55 pages, some of them are 60. But it's not the 6-inch monstrosity that we usually start with.
One more and I'll be done. Sorry. No, training. You didn't mention anything about training, but for example, Open Meetings Act, and there are other, discrimination and things. Do you offer training? I know MASB has classes, and maybe you defer to them for things like that. But what do you have out there?
Well, typically when it comes to board training, I certainly always point to Brad Banasic, who's a good friend at MASB, and they do wonderful work, and they're kind enough to invite us from time to time to speak on various topics. Board in-servicing is something that we do on a fairly regular basis. It's something that we do outside of the policy service. We come in and give a presentation if the board wants to have a work session, or maybe it's a summer retreat or something like that, and provide those insights. Those are certainly things that we can do, MASB can do as well. But that's something that we would consider outside the policy service.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Cook, sorry.
I'm sorry, but the more you talk, the things pop in my head. Okay, we've got our policy manual down to, 80 pages, better than what it was. Next time it comes around, we have an edit to it. Are those edits kept historically from what they were originally? If it were just, I guess I use a Senate bill as an example. They will take an existing law, cross out what's being taken out, add in what's there, and then the next time somebody introduces another bill that's going to edit that law, those same edits are still there. The original verbiage is still there, crossed out. It's a it's historically kept so that we know where we came from, know where we're going.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of that is consistent with probably what your practice is now as you make changes and you come up with a red line version. Our baseline policy manual still talks about 2 readings, a first and a second reading. I've had boards that have wanted to do away with that or find circumstances where maybe they don't want to do that. But those, yes, we present red line versions. Those should be part of the public record. They should be part of the meeting minutes. On the districts where we've come in and we've done it, again, either the entire manual at the end or sometimes we've done them in sections. I bring the matrix, and let's make the matrix part of the public record so the public can see exactly what happened, and we've got that historical reference for what we did with this and why we did it. So absolutely, presenting those documents as there are changes necessary in that format, so there is a historical record in the district, absolutely, and then we, of course, keep a historical record as well of the evolution of the document.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, and it was interesting actually watching the video and what you talked about here, and thank you for answering our questions.
My pleasure.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, just piggybacking on what Trustee Cook said. So that's a change log that you keep on any changes that we make to any policy going forward. If we ever want to go back historically to try to see when something was changed, that would exist in it.
And I've not used the phrase change log, but I'm going to adopt it because I've been calling it, version. We'll go back to version 7 or whatever. I like the phrase of a change log, but yes, I have kept in essence a change log for every district from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, and then as changes have occurred, as they've continued as clients, I keep a list of all those things. Yes.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll just make kind of a clarification. And I believe that I remember at the Metro Bureau, presentation, that you had said that administrative guidelines are kind of given to the board for review 30 days before they're enacted. So if there is feedback that the board has for the administration or clarifications that are needed, that is all part of the process as well. Is that traditional, or did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think your understanding on that is correct, and what we have in our baseline policy manual that we start from is an indicator that administrative regulations, the superintendent is responsible for developing administrative regulations that effectuate the policies the board passes. We have that language right in there. We have right in that baseline policy manual that the superintendent should present those. I think we might use a phrase like reasonable amount of time. I've had districts that have wanted to say 30 days, districts that have wanted to say 2 weeks, what have you, but have that very clear from a policy perspective that there is an expectation that administration will share those guidelines. Certainly we can adopt that up, down, we can extend the time, we can shorten the time, but the idea that the board at least is made aware and has an opportunity to give feedback, that's the whole idea, to help inform those administrative regulations, administrative guidelines, to make sure that it's effectuating the policy, as Trustee Cook asked. Is, I think, vital, and that's something that we want to make sure is reflected in the policy manual, so the board knows that it will be in the know on whatever happens from a regulation standpoint.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the board? Mr. Mena?
More of an administrative question, not for our friend who had joined us today, but administratively, I'm guessing today we brought this topic to the board as a report. What exactly is the plan moving forward? Is there a plan to bring this for discussion at some point
Yes.
in the near future?
We will bring this for discussion back to the board and have the board give us direction as if we want to continue with our current policy procedure, or if the board would like us to change and move in this direction. Our current policies, as has been mentioned, would stay in place until we have the new policy manual that we could implement completely, so that we wouldn't have 2 or 3 manuals that we were trying to keep track of with policy. So we will bring this back to the board for information and discussion, and then once the board has given us direction, we would come to the board with a recommendation that we would ask you to vote on, and we would move forward in that direction.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, while I'm certainly intrigued with the notion of shortening our policies, we have had a long relationship with our current policy service provider, and I would like to at least give them the opportunity to defend their turf and maybe give an opportunity to explain to us what they might have in fold for the future. Or maybe there are some things that we're not considering on any potential change that might need to be brought to our attention. So I think I would certainly be interested in getting that sort of information.
Just a quick technical question. When is our contract with our other provider?
Current contract runs school year to school year, so June 30th, and so if I believe that we pay them in full for the year. Is that right, Ms. Holly?
We do, and then as they send us policies.
Ms. Holly, could you step up so that everybody can hear you? Sorry. Thank you.
Sure. We do pay them a fee. In fact, I've got the invoice sitting on my desk. I haven't paid it because I was waiting to see what was going to happen. Sounds like we'll go ahead and pay that. And then as we get policies, when they send us, there's another fee. It's not as much as the kind of membership type fee that they send us in the beginning. And so every time we get an update, we get a fee.
So if we, my sense would be that we would have our current policy in place at least for the next 6 months. When they send us an update in the middle of the year, if we have made the decision and we have worked with Les Galbertson, we could then make the switch and not pay that fee and move forward with the new approach to policy.
Okay. Mr. Cook.
So if I'm not mistaken, we will actually be paying double for the transition period,
6 months.
whatever it ends up being. And I guess when we bring this forward for discussion, I'd like to see a cost comparison between the two also.
Yep. We can certainly do that.
Okay, so we have a little bit of additional information. We'll get this back on the agenda for further discussion.
Yep.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
very
being
much
here and
for your
answering our
time.
questions. We do really appreciate it, and it's obviously something that we've been dealing with a lot. I think I heard, and I don't know if it was at your presentation that it might have been an MASB thing, a best practice is to really touch a policy once every 3 years, at least. And I know that we don't really have a systematic process in place for doing that. Even if we did and tried to touch every policy every 3 years, I don't know that we could do that with our current policy manual. So certainly as a best practice to be able to be reviewing those and being proactive about looking at them rather than being reactive, which I think is really kind of what we're doing kind of now that's the way we're handling our policies right now.
It's a very common situation that most boards find themselves in because there is obviously a number of items that you have to tend to, and digging through that 500-page manual on a periodic basis is a very difficult thing to do. So we hope that we can provide a solution that allows the board to move forward and have a sense of confidence and security in what they've got as a final product.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we will get some information from
Yes,
you
ma'am.
and reach out to Neola, or reach out to our other policy provider.
Yes, we will.
You
And
could say
we can, because it's on our website. Okay, sorry. Thanks. Reach out to them for some additional information, whether or not they have some kind of presentation, or they can provide us with additional information about why we should use it one way or another.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. All right, so the next item on our agenda is comments from the audience related to agenda items. This will be our first opportunity to hear comments from our community and the general public on agenda items only. There will be another opportunity provided at the end of the meeting for items not on our agenda within our jurisdiction. The board will not engage in dialogue, but may ask administration to follow up with the speaker when appropriate. We do ask that you fill out a card, which I think that I just saw you hand one to Ms. Sally, and we ask that you be considerate of others and follow the rules of common courtesy. Please refrain from personal attacks against individuals, as slanderous and defamatory comments could lead to legal exposure. Due to the lengthy nature of our business this evening, we do ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes, and the time will be noted by Mr. Menon when you reach the 30 seconds from your time limit.
I'm Daniel Dubay. I have comments, or I had comments about policy updates. And then I received a letter in the mail about 3 days ago, which I believe all of you received, from a concerned parent. And I'd like to read that because it really says what I was trying to say, but says it much better. Dear Novi School Board, the following letter below was sent to Board Trustee O'Connor and Board President Murphy at the ESB Taft Road address before the June 1st, 2017 meeting. I requested that it be shared with the entire board. After watching the recording of the June 1st meeting, I decided to send the letter to each individual board member with additional concerns. It should come as no surprise to Novi board members that people are very hesitant to communicate concerns at Novi school board meetings due to the possibility of being subjected to denigration or retaliation. The comments at the end of the meeting by the assistant superintendent directed toward a Novi resident who spoke during open comments legitimized that fear. The assistant superintendent used time during his report to the board to wrap himself and his coworkers in his, quote, all for the children cloak, as if they were the only people who care about children due to their lifelong careers in public education. He attempted to demean and belittle someone who was using a legal, peaceful, and appropriate process to bring a matter of concern to the attention of the school board. The school district could not ask for a better example and real-life civic lesson about how everyone in this country can have a voice if they choose. The person who spoke during public comment showed how it is the duty of every caring, concerned, and civic-minded person to hold public officials accountable each day. He petitioned others and spoke out against changing the district nepotism policy by utilizing the rights provided to all of us in the United States Constitution. For that, he was demeaned and criticized by an employee of the Novi Public School District, while the school board who employs him allowed him to do it. The employees and school board members may not agree with or like what people say during public comment, but there is a reason the law requires public board meetings to have the public comment item on the agenda. The comments by the Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations directed towards the words and actions of the person speaking during public comment seem to be meant to humiliate and intimidate that person and will result in suppressing other future public comment that the board or school employees may not like. The school board condoned what the Assistant Superintendent did by not requiring him to share his personal opinions like any other parent, as a parent and community member during the comments from the audience portion of the agenda instead of time designated for administrative reports. The board allowing that to happen shows obvious favoritism toward district employees over parents and members of the community. How does that support Novi School District Goal Number 4 about improved customer service through common standards, systems, and principles? I am hopeful that you will read the letter pasted below that I sent prior to the June 1st, 2017 meeting with an open mind and consider the issues brought to you as members of the Novi Community School District Board of Education. And the letter that goes on from this concerned parent, who I don't know and I've never met, is to Mr. O'Connor, which is what I received. Dear Mr. O'Connor, thank you for serving on the school board for many years and representing the voters of the Novi District. Your past actions and voting record indicate that you try to make every effort to do what is in the best interest of the students and make decisions that maintain the integrity of the school district. You are a valuable voice for the voters of this district. I am addressing this letter to you because of the concerns you voiced at the May 4th, 2017 board meeting about changing policy 3120. The board is making the argument that because they have corrected issues with the hiring process, there is no longer a need for policy 3120. I believe that the board needs to evaluate in a much broader sense how changing policy 3120 at this point exposes the school district to serious liability. As a long-time Novi resident with a child currently attending Novi schools, I am very concerned about the recent story posted at novi.org about the school board considering the change in district policy 3120. It appears from what I have read that although the superintendent was not technically violating the policy at the time the teacher who is now his daughter-in-law was hired, there will be a violation by the end of the school year. Now, some on the school board are attempting to remedy the situation by changing Novi School District Policy 3120 from the current status of forbidding employment of the immediate family members of administrators to allowing immediate family members of administrators to be employed by the district. I saw that 2 residents also spoke to me.
Mr. Dubay.
And I noticed that you allowed, at the last meeting, Mr. Barr to inappropriately use his board report time to chastise a citizen. And I was hoping that you'd give the additional 5 minutes to hear this citizen.
We have a very full agenda this evening, Mr. Dubay. Thank you.
You don't want to hear what the rest of what the citizen has to say?
We've all received the letter, Mr. Dubay. Thank you.
The public. Thank you.
All right. All right, next opportunity, please to my agenda. Our next item is our consent agenda. These are items that are of a routine nature, that they don't require much discussion. I would like to entertain a motion.
I move that the Novi School Board of Education accept consent items A and B as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Stevenson and supported by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion on either of those? Mr.
Yeah, one of the consent agenda items is the renewal of the MASB annual membership. And while I'm in support of that, I just wanted to let the board know that there was quite a bit of concern raised by the Oakland County School Boards Association at last week's annual planning meeting about the MASB and the direction it's taking. And quite a few concerns where they're going to talk to the executive director about the focus on what MASB is trying to do specifically in terms of promoting training, not as board development, but really as an additional revenue source. And the MASB has been doing things like having a summer leadership summit at Mission Point Resort in Mackinac Island, sending kind of a wrong message, according to the Oakland County School Boards Association. And even more seriously is the executive director's article about now reaching out to charter schools to begin to train board members of charter schools. So there's been major concerns about the direction that the MASB is going. And while I will support membership for another year, I do think we need to be watching them more closely.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm bringing that to our attention, Mr. O'Connor.
It brings up a question. Is there an alternative to it, like the Metro Bureau or anything like that? I guess I'd like to look into it. I do support, doing this, renewing for another year, but if we're going to look into it, I think we need to look into alternatives.
And I don't know enough about the Metro Bureau. I know we're members of them. Do you know?
Metro, but we can provide information on what the Metro Bureau is and what they are not, and we could also provide information on MASB and identify some of the changes in direction that Mr. O'Connor has talked about. And then as we go through the year, this is an annual membership, and so as we go towards next year, the board could have a choice as to whether or not to continue membership in that organization.
No, I just grabbed Metro Bureau as an example. If there's another alternative, I'd like to hear about it.
We certainly can provide the board with information that we have.
Thank you. So we will look for that. Maybe not in the Friday update because that's kind of quick, but at some point down the line we'll be looking for that. Our next
we need to vote on that.
Oh, excuse me. It's been moved and supported. I would like to call the question. All those in favor of consent agenda items A and B, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have our action items. The first action item is our personnel report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and I will turn to Ms. Diglio to present another personnel report for us.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. This evening I am recommending 4 new hires. Brittany Aguanaga, who will be teaching ELA and theater at the middle school. Grace Ferraro, who will be at Novi Meadows as a teacher. Julia Geiser, who will be a teacher at Parkview. And Kathleen Miss, who will be a district math interventionist. I'd also like to make the recommendation of Maureen Kim's resignation and Joanne Purek's retirement. Also on tonight's agenda, I'm making the recommendation for a leave of absence of 1 year for long-term disability for Mr. Don Sharp, who's currently at Village Oaks.
I would entertain a motion. Mrs. Budzinski.
Move to approve personnel report as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Budzinski, supported by Mr. Mena. Is there any questions or comments for our Human Resource Director? Okay, we will be looking for replacements for both the Deerfield special ed teacher and the ELA teacher at middle school.
We are going to be fine at the middle school. We have a transfer that is moving over.
Okay.
And we're still evaluating the special ed, whether we need the staff. We'll be doing that when Ms. Patel returns from Japan.
Okay. Thank you.
It is likely that one of those will be replaced.
Okay. Thank you. All right. It's been moved and supported. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries 7-0. The next item on our report is the Food Service Management Company contract renewal. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. At the June 1st, 2016 school board meeting, Chartwells was approved to serve as the district's food service management company for the 2016-17 fiscal year. The district has the option to renew the contract annually for up to 4 additional years, which requires annual approval by the Board of Education. As discussed at the May 18th, 2017 school board meeting, district administrators have been extremely satisfied with the work performed by Chartwells, and especially Aval Gazzarato, Director of Dining Services. The Michigan Department of Education is required to approve the renewal before being presented to the Board of Education for approval. We received approval notification of the Chartwells renewal from the MDE on June 5th, 2017, and that is attached in your board packet. Chartwells and the district administration have agreed to a $321,812 financial guarantee for the 17-18 fiscal year. So the food service management renewal was presented for information and discussion at the May 18th school board meeting, and we would look this evening for the board to approve that. And I don't know if Mr. Barr has additional comments or not.
No, there really should have been a action listed there, which is to approve Chartwells for the 17-18 school year. No, everything. I think Ms. Kubzinski asked for a revenue comparison, which is included inside your board packet. Last 3-year comparison, the current plus 2 previous. Otherwise, that's what I have for you tonight.
All right, well, I'll entertain a motion first. Mr. Mena?
Yeah, I move that we support the food service contract renewal as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Stevenson. Is there discussion, questions on the item? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Next item is our Board of Education calendar for 2017-18. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. As you know, the Board of Education is required to identify the Board of Education meetings annually. And so tonight, we present you with 3 options. We have Board of Education meetings dates with quarterly Saturday work sessions. We have Board of Education meeting dates with quarterly Thursday work sessions. And we have Board of Education meeting dates with rotating quarterly Thursday and Saturday work sessions. And so typically, the Board of Education meets the first and third Thursday of the month. We have identified that we would like to meet quarterly if needed. And so we have 3 options for those quarterly meetings, either Saturday, a Thursday, or a combination of Thursday and Saturday work sessions. So tonight we would ask the board to identify which they would like to approve and ask that the board approve that so that we can post them and meet the legally required standard to post our meetings for the 17-18 school year.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Can I just request that I move that we put the rules aside for this particular one due to confusion so that we can have the discussion first. Otherwise, we're going to run into potentially voting on 3 different
Certainly.
policies. But I'd like to start the discussion if I could.
Please do.
Again, I'm pretty flexible. I generally keep my Thursdays open for school activities. So if I had my druthers, I would select the middle policy. I'll call policy B, having board meeting dates with quarterly Thursday work sessions.
Other comments?
I would prefer the third one where we split it half and half and we rotate, because some of us have to go to work the next day on Fridays. So sometimes when the meetings are lengthy, it causes some problems. So Saturdays would be a little bit more preferable. And I think to share the wealth, we should just split them half and half.
Mrs. Kuzinski?
I support what Mrs. Stevenson said. There are instances 2 or 3 hours really aren't sufficient, and to do our best work and our best thinking sometimes at 10 at night, or you try to go later, I think sometimes becomes counterproductive, and I think that it's a nice compromise to try for this next year, and it does accommodate, some concerns that Saturdays are difficult for some board members. It's always nice that we have a year out of dates, but as we know, sometimes life where we don't have control over some other things that result in a conflict, and there has to be some flexibility as we go along if we need to.
And I would say I am indifferent too, but flexible, and so maybe the in-between, I could support the Thursday and Saturday mix also.
And I did try and look at them and pick out the Saturday, the organizational meeting in January is usually kind of a lengthy one. So I thought that made sense to have it on a Saturday, and then the self-evaluation, since we usually have someone come in for that sometimes that goes longer as well. So I thought those made the most sense, and then the other 2 can be utilized for alternative work sessions, whether they be about budget issues or something else that comes up that we can plug into those times that might not be quite as taxing and time-consuming. So, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, like Mr. Mann, I prefer the Thursdays because the Saturdays I'm almost always running into either a community event or a work requirement that I've had to juggle around quite extensively in the past. Haven't been able to make all of the sessions, or been able to show up for a little bit of it, and so my preference is number 2, and that's the one I would support tonight.
All right. Mr. O'Connor.
I would also support all Thursdays, but if we go the other route, we would still have to have a meeting on June 28th, a tentative meeting, again on Thursday night. That's why I support the Thursdays, for either new hires or to approve our budget. I mean, we're going to have a meeting in 2 weeks, June 29th, because we're going to have to approve our budget. So I know we're going to have a meeting on June 28th next year. So if we go the other way, we still have to have that meeting. That's why I support the Thursdays.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we need a motion, Mrs. Kuzinski.
I make a motion that the board adopt I believe it's choice C that has rotating quarterly Thursday, Saturday work sessions.
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Kuzinski and supported by Mrs. Cadwell. All those in favor? Oh, Stevenson. I apologize. Oh, yes, additional discussion on the item. Mr. O'Connor?
Yeah, I also have a concern about August 22nd or 24th for new hires. I would like to suggest the 22nd because the 24th is the first football game of the year.
Good catch.
That makes sense.
Road game.
And again, with this option that you're asking for, we're going to have a June 28th meeting.
Oh, I should have probably amended that.
Well, I think
We can add that.
we can add it, and it has the 22nd or the 24th, so I think that we can just eliminate the one. So thank you for that catch, Mr.
We can add the June 28th meeting also, as long as we give proper notice to the
And
community.
potentially, the legislature will give us a budget by May 1st next year, so.
Oh,
I've been told.
why are you looking at him? Wishful
Maybe
thinking.
first of 18 for this year.
Well, we would hope that we wouldn't need the meeting on the 28th, but it is a distinct possibility, obviously, Mr. O'Connor, but it's something that we can add.
We've had one the last 5 years. I don't know why you wouldn't add it now to let the public know.
Did you have something else, Mr. Miller?
No, I was just kind of doing secretarial work, keeping a little bit of a tally, but I think we're in good shape right now. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so it's been moved and supported. If there is no additional discussion, all those in favor of option C, rotating quarterly Thursday, Saturday work sessions with the August 22nd date as opposed to the 24th, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, motion carries 5-0 with Mr. O'Connor.
5-2.
5-2, Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Cook dissenting. All right, we will move on to the contract ratification. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Tonight, we have two contract ratifications for the board to approve. The first is the Novi Transportation Association. Tentative agreement was reached with the Novi Transportation Association. The administration recommends the contract agreement with the NTA be approved. The NTA and the district bargaining teams met on several occasions to negotiate the new collective bargaining agreement. The current bargaining agreement expires on June 30th, 2017. Many issues were thoroughly discussed in a very collaborative environment during these bargaining sessions. The tentative agreement, as mentioned, has been reached. The NTA bargaining team was comprised of Kim Edwards, Jerry Earl, and Mike McMillan. The district bargaining team includes Steve Bark, Harold Diglio, Steve Matthews, and Dr. Weber. The Novi Transportation Association, as we presented in closed session a couple of weeks ago, there were some editorial changes to several articles. The compensation piece is a 1% on-schedule raise in 17-18 and in 18-19, and then 19-20 there is a wage reopener. And so we would recommend that the Board of Education approve that contract. If you have additional questions, Ms. Diglio will be here to answer those.
All right. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education ratify the Novi Transportation Association bargaining unit contract agreement.
It's been moved by Mrs. Stevenson and supported by Mrs. Hood. Do we have discussion on the item? Mr. Cook?
Thank you for the write-up. I guess I would have preferred it earlier in the week so I could have gone through some of these articles and looked at them. In your explanation, you gave a 1% from 17-18, 1% 18-19. That actually is from NESPA, not MTA. NTA.
It actually, I believe it's the same for both. Is that right, Ms. Diglio?
These were the same summaries that were given at closed session.
Yeah, but we're not allowed to take information out of closed session. And
that's right. I had to collect them because it had not been ratified by the group yet. So it's hard to make those public before they actually vote on them.
Yeah, but once they make them public, you could share them to us in the private board book.
Sure.
You know, it would be appreciated so we could go through it and get the information up front.
Did she confirm the wage increases?
I missed it. It's down in Appendix A.
Correct.
It is.
But there have been no changes to the information you gave us at closed session.
That's correct.
This is the exact same information that we have. Okay. All right, is there additional discussion, comments? Okay, it has been moved and supported. All those in favor of ratifying the contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Cook dissenting. All right. Next is contract ratification as well. Dr. Matthews.
Correct. This is for NESPA, which is our Novi Educational Support Personnel Association. We have reached a tentative agreement with them that was discussed in closed session 2 weeks ago as well. They met on several occasions, the district bargaining team and NESPA, to negotiate the new contract. It also expires on June 30th, 2017. Again, many issues were discussed, and the bargaining team was comprised of Kim Edwards from MEA, Sandy Brazel, who is the president of NESPA. And the district bargaining team included Steve Barr, Carol Diglio, myself, and Dr. Weber. And again, there were several editorial changes in some articles. There were some language changes in a grievance procedure and noted on the summary that you now have. And the compensation, again, 1% on schedule and for 17-18 and 18-19. And just as with the other contract, employees have to be effective or highly effective to receive that increase. So we would ask that the Novi Community School District Board of Education ratify this contract with the Novi Educational Support Personnel Association.
All right, I would entertain a motion. Mr. Mena.
Yeah, I move that the board ratify the Novi Educational Support Personnel Association bargaining unit contract as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Stevenson. Mr. O'Connor?
I will be abstaining from this vote because my spouse is in the bargaining.
Okay, thank you. Is there other comments or discussion items? Mr. Cook?
Again, this information up front would have been much more helpful. Article 23, the compensation, it states a 1-year increase plus a step.
Correct.
So it is, okay. The other one did not have, there are no steps, so it did not state that, but I was just curious.
They received their steps as well. There just was not a change in their salary schedule, so they would receive their step as well, and that's normal language. We didn't change their language.
The NTA will be
That's
receiving
correct.
steps as well?
That's correct. If they are eligible for a step, then all of the contracts are based on an effective or highly effective rating, and they would receive a step as well. If they are eligible.
It doesn't state that in the right.
If they are eligible to do so.
So I, without getting this information ahead of time, and I have a hard time supporting it. So, we'll be supporting it.
Okay. Have there been changes to the information that we got from the thing? Okay, just for clarification.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, it has been moved and supported. All those in favor of supporting the NESPA contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1 with Mr. O'Connor abstaining and Mr. Cook dissenting. Next, we have our policy updates and revisions. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The Governance and Board Governance and Policy Committee has reviewed and approved the following policy for revisions and updating, and is bringing them before the board for a vote this evening. We have grouped the policies into 4 groups. The employment policies, policy number 3120, employment of professional staff, policy number 4120, employment of support staff, and policy 8100, the new nepotism policy, we're asking you to vote on as a group. Broadcast and web content policies 7000.06 and 7540.02, we're asking you to vote on as a group. The policies 5111.01, homeless students, 5111.03, children of youth and foster care, 8340, letter of reference, and 8500, food service, we're asking you to vote as a group. And the policies 5610, emergency removal, suspension and expulsion, policies 5610.01, and policy 8400, school safety, we're asking you to vote as a group as well. And so those recommendations are noted in the recommendation, and we would ask that you would vote on those individually, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
A, B, C, and D.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So first I would entertain a motion for Group A. Mrs. Kudzinski.
I move to approve Section A of the Neola policies as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Kudzinski and supported by Mrs. Stevenson. No discussion. Mr. O'Connor.
Before we begin this discussion, we had received an email from Dr. Matthews this afternoon. I guess it was in response to a community member that was concerned about us voting on this block because of the Open Meetings Act. Have we got any clarification as to whether we should proceed or not proceed based on some concerns with the Open Meetings Act?
We have not received the official notification from the attorney, but our belief is that there is no Open Meetings Act violation because, and I can read what I sent to the board. If I can find it. That it is our understanding, based on the Open Meetings Act, that committees that take no action are not required to post their meetings and take minutes, and so we believe that it is perfectly appropriate for the board to vote on these as they are presented this evening.
So that's your interpretation, not our legal counsel's interpretation?
Correct.
Okay, are we going to be in trouble just in case that you might be wrong in that interpretation? Would we be liable by voting on this? What would be the ramifications?
The ramifications would that the board could come back and rescind the vote and move forward if there was a violation to correct the violation and then to present the policies to the board again.
Good question. Any other additional questions, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I'm not going to take up a lot of time because I think I made my position clear on this policy now for quite some time. I did spend some time, we did receive a petition with about 200 names last meeting, and there were a lot of great people in the community who signed that particular petition. A lot of people I highly respect, so I took the time to make a few phone calls just to make sure that they understood exactly what it is that we were looking to do as a board here today. And surprisingly, I wasn't expecting a lot of the anger that I received from the other end of the call. I guess what I was hearing consistently from some community members is supporting this change shows a lack of integrity of the board. Again, I don't know if I'm going to go there, but I won't be supporting this. It is. I kind of chuckled when our visitor from Lusk Albertson was here earlier because he had made a quote that stated that policies are not intended to govern every situation, and in my attempt to come up with what I consider better policy for this, I was kind of pushed back a little bit because the policy that I had proposed to bring before the board did not take into account every single situation that you could possibly have. So I don't think this is good policy, and I won't be supporting these changes.
Mrs. Budzinski?
I have a couple comments, and I'm going to keep them brief because on the June 1st meeting, I did take quite a bit of time to talk about the role of the Governance Policy Committee, as well as gave some personal comments. I would like to thank the individuals who provided feedback to the board, whether in public comments during board meetings, via email, via participating and signing a community member's petition, or by providing anonymous feedback via U.S. mail. There is one question that has been asked that I want to address, and that is, have you asked people what they think of the current policy and the recommended changes? And I want to share with the board that I did seek community input and feedback. I called people who signed the petition, asking that policy number 3120 not be changed, and I spoke with other community members. In all instances, we had constructive professional dialogue regarding the policies. I provided background information. I explained the work the Governance and Policy Committee did to make recommended changes and develop a new policy, and I answered their questions. All of the people I spoke with agreed that the policy needed changing and supported the recommendation. In fact, many people were encouraged by the safeguards put in place in new policy 8100. Another point, when I spoke with some of the people, I asked if they had a concern about retaliation. And a comment I received back was, when the petition was presented to them, the idea was presented that their voice could be heard without attending a meeting. They said there was not concern on their part that they would be retaliated against, nor was that part of what was talked about when the petition was presented. I do have some concerns if we don't change this policy that one of 2 current Novi Community School District employees would need to leave the district. Is that in the best interest of the district or for the employees who are both performing their jobs effectively? I'm going to continue to support what the committee has put forward.
Other dialogue or comments? Mr. Cook?
Yeah, I read through all 3 policies quite extensively, and I did recommend some updates and changes to them. But the one thing that sticks out is the verbiage in 8100 is mostly still present in the existing 3120 and 4120, with a few exceptions. We sat through a presentation to try to reduce the number of policies and the amount of policies and stuff, but here we're creating another policy when most of that verbiage already exists. So I guess I'm sitting here going, well, why don't we take the first step forward and not create a new policy, but keep the verbiage that's in the existing policies and maybe add that is missing. To me, that sounds like a wise move, and I guess I don't support adding additional policies, and I won't be supporting this.
Any additional? Yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Cook asked a question about whether or not in 4120 we needed to include CPR, if you remember.
It was added.
And
I saw that,
CPR
yes.
was added to the policy. And in 8100, when we were at the last meeting, I did indicate that we were going to delete the phrase board members and administrators shall publicly disclose their relationship to a candidate or current employee, and replace that with if a candidate or current employee is an immediate family member of a board member or administrator, the relationship shall be publicly disclosed. In the phrase we had in, we didn't say immediate family member, so we cleared that up. So that was also changed in terms of the policy.
Thank you for clarifying. If there are any, yes,
I'd also like to request a roll call vote on this.
certainly. I'll just make some brief comments of my own. Mr.
Yeah, I'd like to comment if you want.
No, go ahead.
Assuming you want to wrap things up. Given my comments over the last 2 meetings, it's clear that I'm not going to support new policies that I really think condone nepotism in the workplace, because I just think that's a bad thing. If you look at the last sentence, the first paragraph of 8100, it says nepotism or the appearance of nepotism can degrade staff morale, can arouse public distrust, and is an obstacle to teamwork, effectiveness, and quality performance. So I just don't understand why this board would support nepotism for our great district. One last story. I was talking to one of my colleagues at the Oakland County School Boards Association legislative meeting last night, and she was sharing with me a story where in her district about 15 years ago, a very popular principal that had been in the district for 20 years, very popular, had his son was hired as a teacher, and after 2 years, that son did not get tenure. Principal came before the school board and said, if you don't give my son tenure, I'm quitting. He ended up resigning, and it split the community for well over 10 years, according to this board member. And to me, that's the kind of danger I think we're facing when we condone nepotism. So I'll be voting against this.
Well, I do appreciate the careful thought and consideration that's been given. I think that I'd like to clarify that I don't condone nepotism. I think nepotism is hiring somebody that is not qualified for a position. So I would like to state, just for the record, that I don't support that, but I do support putting the best people in place regardless of relationship. I think we have done some great work in our Human Resource Office to take some of the, we've heard that it's a robust thing from outside, a robust process, difficult to influence from outside people. And I think we have some great people in this district that are working here that are related to each other, and I haven't seen that that has created that. So I did spend a lot of time reading through the emails and comments. I reached out to several people that, some that both signed the petition and others that chose not to sign the petition that approached me and talked to me a little bit about it. I do think that at the top of the petition it has some information that's not correct, which is was concerning to me at the time. So when I called people, I asked what their understanding was, and the understanding that Dr. Matthews was publicly reprimanded was not true, which was at the beginning of that statement. So, and many of them thought that he was violating a policy, which was also not found to be true. So I just want to clear that up. The board obviously did have a conversation with Dr. Matthews about disclosing information in a timely manner, but our current policy did not require that. And this policy has some built-in safeguards so that that information is disclosed, and I think that is a step in the right direction. I know that's something that we went back and looked at after board members and community members expressed some concern that there was no disclosure required by our current policy. So I think some of it had worked to address those concerns. I think the additional parameters and the burdens of proof that we can require as a result of this policy. And yes, it's true, maybe it belongs more in administrative guidelines. I mean, at this point, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like down the road. But for now, to use this as a guiding document for nepotism, not 3120 and 4120 are both hiring policies. So leaving them as hiring policies and then having this cover the entire district, to me, makes a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to use a hiring policy to basically fire someone, as Mrs. Glebzinski alluded to. That, to me, violates the intent of the policy, which is the hiring practice of that. So I think that the committee tried to come up with some additional language that would address some of those concerns. I think that to me, it makes sense to have a policy that does have some disclosure elements and also has some additional documentation that we've built into this for our employment office, that they have to show how they follow procedures. They have to show who's involved in the selection process. People on the board can't be involved in that decision. Administrators who have a relationship can't be involved in any way, and that it will be treated as serious infraction and may result in disciplinary action. I think that's some pretty strong language that we've put in there to discourage the hiring of anybody who is not qualified just based on a relationship. So I will be supporting the recommendation of the committee. Mr. Cook.
Point of clarification, 3120 and 4120 are employment policies, not hiring policies. So the employment of people, not necessarily the hiring of people.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I stand corrected. And Mr. Cook has asked for a roll call vote. If we are ready to vote, Mr. Mena?
Trustee Cook.
No.
Trustee Glebzinski.
Yes.
Trustee Hood.
Yes.
Trustee Mena, no. Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connor.
No.
Trustee Stevenson.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 4-0.
4-3.
4-3. I apologize, my math tonight is off at almost 5 till 10. I can still read the clock. We will move on to the next set of items, which is our Section B. Dr. Matthews.
I can just do a motion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that in the best interest of the Novi Community School District, the Board of Education adopts Section B of the Neola policies as presented.
Support.
Been moved by Mrs. Glebzinski, supported by Mrs. Hood. These are our broadcast policies. Is there any discussion on these? Mr. O'Connor?
Do we have audio equipment in place and ready to go for workshop meetings?
We have talked to Mr. Lalonde, our auditory manager, and we believe that we have the appropriate equipment. There may be some modifications we have to do, but we believe we have the appropriate equipment to do that.
All right. Other comments or questions, Mr. Cook?
A couple things on 754002 property. On page 3, it listed all links included on the pages, all links included on the page's board website or website services and apps must also meet criteria and comply with state and federal law. Example, copyright laws, CIPA, Section 504, ADA, and COPA. Our social media sites that we link to, ADA compliant.
We will need to verify that they are, and if they are not, we will need to unlink them because of the ADA requirement that we need to follow.
Okay, that kind of brings up my next question. Who monitors the website to make sure that all links are ADA
We
compliant?
subscribe to a service called Site Improve, and they give us, every 5 days, they give us a report on our website and identify the links and the pictures and identify if they meet the requirements of the ADA. So we subscribe to a service that does that for us.
Do we have a lot that are currently showing up that way, or?
We had a lot that were showing up that way, but we have made significant improvements in that area. But as I said, they give us a report every 5 days, and so as with most websites, the things change continually, and that's why they do it every 5 days. And so we used to have some significant issues. We have much less right now.
Okay. And then on page 5, we've checked off option 2 as far as teachers using the web content as in teaching aids. A teacher who elects to supplement or enhance student learning through the use of web services and or apps is responsible for verifying, certifying to the superintendent that the web services, apps, and FERPA compliant policy and it complies with all requirements of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPA, and Children's Internet Protection Act. I do believe the last time this came forward, I asked to have Section 504 and the ADA compliance there because if we're putting content out, we're requiring that. So
It is on there.
it is not checked. Okay, I was wondering if there, because I never received a response as to why that wasn't followed through on, or no.
I don't have any notes in 754002 with me.
So certainly I would agree with you, Mr. Cook, that would be important for us to do. And so we, as the board votes on that, I would suggest that the board would amend the resolution to say as amended and note that we would check the 504 and ADA piece there.
It's been an oversight. We'll take a check.
Okay. Should I amend my motion?
Sure. Would you like to amend the motion?
All right, I move that in the best interest of the Novi Community School District, the Board of Education adopts Section B of the Neola policies as presented with the revision to policy number 7540.02 to check the box on page 5 of 5, indicating for option 2 that it will also apply for Section 504 in the ADA.
Been moved by Mrs. Gorzinski.
Support.
Supported by Mrs. Stevens. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor of Section B of our policies, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have Section C, which is those that need to be in place by July 1st. These deal with homeless students, children, youth, and foster care, letters of reference, and food service. I'd entertain a motion. Mrs. Gibson.
Motion to approve that in the best interest of the Novi Community School District, the Board of Education adopts Section C of the Neola policies as presented.
Any discussion on?
You need a
So,
second.
I'm sorry. It's been moved by Mrs. Gubzinski, seconded by Mrs. Hood. Any discussion or questions about those?
Just one comment. Mr. Cook asked about the definition of trailer parks, whether that needed to be added, and the response back was that we've used the federal language in the McKinney-Vento Education of Homeless Children and Youth Assistance Act verbatim.
May I ask who you got that response from? Because if you look up the McKinney-Vento Act, it does not state in it, under a definition of a homeless person, as being in a trailer park or giving any requirement thereof being a trailer park. I won't support this based off of that because we have a number of trailer parks in here, and I do believe it may open up the district to additional costs that would be unnecessary.
Okay, I'll amend my motion. How about I amend the motion that we adopt Section C of Neola policies as presented, but eliminate the approval of policy 5111.01 as presented, and we can get that clarified. We have one more meeting before July 1 where we can vote on that policy. There's some more.
I support that.
Moved by Mrs. Kuzinski and supported by Mrs. Hood. So that will mean that the motion will be to approve policies 5111.03, policy 8340, and 8500. All those in favor,
Yes.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. We will look to get an answer for certain about where that language came from.
Okay.
All right. Section D. I entertain a motion. Mrs.
That in the
Kuzinski.
best interest of the Novi Community School District, the Board of Education adopts Section D of the Neola policies as presented.
Support.
Been moved by Mrs. Kuzinski and supported by Mr. Mena. Is there any discussion on these items?
Just a comment.
Certainly.
Mr. Cook asked about 5610.01. Throughout the policy, it listed board and then superintendent in brackets. And the question was, why is superintendent in brackets? Should it be deleted if it's not accurate? And Ms. Holly did talk with Neola, and they said with regards to board or superintendent, it's worded that way so we have a choice. Some boards delegate all of this to the superintendent, and others don't. Basically, her comment back was, in our district, the superintendent recommends and carries through on suspensions, but if an expulsion is being considered, then the superintendent recommends and the board carries through on that. So by having both individuals listed, then it represents what our district is doing. And I didn't receive any questions back after that clarification, but I wanted to make sure y'all knew that.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, in the policy, I just opened up where it talks about expulsion. It does refer to the board. Where it talks about suspension, it does refer to the superintendent, and the other is crossed out.
We clarified that.
It has been clarified.
Okay, so you feel comfortable with the
Yeah, the board expels the superintendent.
So she, all right, well, I misspoke, apologize. We did address it, that was a good news.
Okay. All right. It's been moved and supported. All those in favor of supporting Section D of our policies as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. All right, we are finished with our action portion. Now we are into information and discussion. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and I will turn the first information and discussion item over to Mr. Barr, who will present the 2016-17 Budget Amendment 1. Mr. Barr.
Thank you. For the next 2.5 hours, we'll be reviewing the budget. Tell me Budget Amendment 1, then we'll go into the original budget. Mr. Connie, you were pretty close on the 10 o'clock yes on the budget.
It's only the most important thing that we do all year.
No, it's not. That's a good one. Okay. You've seen many of these numbers throughout the last 6 months as we've had many discussions about budget, negotiations, so you shouldn't really see too much here that is surprising. Please ask your questions as we're going. What you're seeing today is Budget Amendment 1. It's just a high-level summary of revenues and expenditures from the original budget to the Budget Amendment 1. You can see the increase in revenue, increase in expenditures. The bottom line of the revenues over expenditures are virtually the same as they were when the board adopted the original budget last June 30th, I believe, of 2016. lots of ups and lots of downs. It's not like there was just a change of $36,000. We will go through some details in a moment. At the end of 2017, June 30th of 17, we'd have about $9.5 million of fund balance. You can look at that in two different ways when you calculate your fund balance percentage. One is just a true fund balance percentage of expenditures, which would be 12.84%. The other way is to calculate it excluding the 147C retirement money, which we've talked about before, which is the money that flows in and flows back out. It's about $4.4 million. Many districts, either way, can exclude that from your revenues and your expenditures for purposes of calculation. Depends how you look at it. So our fund balance is 13%, give or take, depending on how you want to look at the fund balance calculation. The breakdown between the revenue, local, state, federal, and transfers and other transactions. Local is primarily our property taxes, along with revenue received from programs like care, preschool, facility rentals. State is what it sounds like, our state revenue. Federal, you see a decline. That doesn't mean our federal revenue went down for the current year. That is us adjusting for what we think we're going to spend this year, and the balance will be carried over to next year. So we're reporting what we think we're going to spend, because you do not get to recognize your revenue until you spend the money. It's a reimbursement-based program. And then when you get an amendment a year from now, or 6 months from now, whenever my successor does that, then they will reflect that carryover in the grants for next year. It adds to the 17-18 grants. So we have an increase in revenue of about $652,000. Majority, when you see the state going up $766,000, a big part of that is the 147C money, again, the state revenue that we receive for the retirement money that goes in and out. And that went up by, I believe it was $400,000 this year. So that's in revenue, in expenditures also. And again, here's your breakdown of the changes during the year. Property taxes are just really adjustments to values. When your property taxes go down on your non-homesteads, and the state makes up the revenue in the state revenue. Our care and preschool have been very successful. You'll see an increase we already built in to the original budget increase from the prior year. However, we even exceeded those numbers as a new building. And actually, here's the 147C money, up $345,000. Other revenue went up, and that's just based on the formula again. When the taxes go down, other income goes up, along with monies dealing with student increases and other grants. Federal grants we spoke about, our county special ed millage that we received through Oakland Schools. We had received a slight increase this year. There was they call it a one-time distribution, although for the last couple, 2-3 years, we've had a one-time distribution. So that's when they have excess revenue and they don't hold on to it at Oakland Schools, they distribute it to the local school districts. And then sale of fixed assets, we don't have that every year. We have it significantly, I call it significant, $69,000 every 2 or 3 years when we sell off excess buses, when we buy a chunk of buses or some vehicles such as pickup trucks, snow trucks, so on and so forth. So that's something you see in this year's budget, but not in next year's budget. A lot of numbers and expenditures, and we won't go through them all. We are required by the state to adopt our budgets in this format, so you're seeing the breakdown. And really just have a lot of spreads. There's no way to explain one number exactly. It's just a categorization, but you can see the bottom line is $615,000 increase. And again, $347,000, that is just the retirement money that comes to us and we just pay it right back out. And you'll see in a moment a better summary of our expenditures. Our salaries are down $325,000 from original. Don't forget, we do our original budget in June. We had retirements, Carol, 2 or 3 that came in last August, I believe, for retirements or so. And then you just don't know who's going to be on leave of absence, things like that. So those are estimated salaries. Retirements up, as I spoke about a moment ago. Contracted services, there's a lot of things that affect contracted services. We've spoken about earlier in the year that we gave some increases in wages to custodians that was required to be able to maintain our custodial force. We've had some increase in support for some of our special needs children in the form of occupational therapy, physical therapy needs. We've received a few more, actually 5 more students in the district that go to out-of-district schools. And so we have to transport them. There's an increase of $50,000 there. We purchased science kits we've spoken about, that the board has heard about from the science CALs in the last few meetings. That went up $73,000. So that's a big part of the $400,000 increase. Supplies went up by $165,000, about $130,000 of that were the science textbooks that the board adopted about a month ago, I believe. That is for the secondary level. Tax tribunals, thank goodness, is down $70,000. For those of you who were on the board about 3 or 4 years ago, our tax tribunals in the district were $2.5 million. I'm here to tell you this year our tax tribunals will be $10,000. So that shows the economy coming back. Tuition payments up $195,000. You send 5 more children to out-of-district programs that you don't offer here because you have 1 or 2 students in a program. A lot of the student costs, all the student costs is passed on to us, and that could be between $30,000 and $50,000 per student, excluding transportation. So that's a fluctuating number every year. You really don't know because it could be that the decision was made with a lot of people involved, parents, and a lot of the team in the district. Maybe it's not until October, November that it's better to be educated in a different environment. So those are the big changes in the expenditures. Again, the bottom line is about $600,000 in our expenditures. Recreation fund is the program that we receive a millage for, about $1 million, and we receive about $2 million of revenue. We charge a variety of programs here. Again, this is for community recreation and community playground. So an example of things we would have charged this year, and actually the past few years, outside of operating programs through Mr. Steve's department, would be things like a portion of the playground through early childhood buildings available for the community, a portion of the stadium field, not like 30 yards of it, but we do a time study and we say, well, it's open to the community from X time to X time, and we really do a good time study on that. So we have charged about $1.2 million of bond projects that otherwise would be in the bond through recreation millage over the last 3 years. So part of the expenditures are programs like that. You don't really look at the recreation millage on a percentage basis. You look at it, those are going to be big hits. You might accumulate a fund balance for a few years, and then you have a project and you know, we need to replace the tennis courts in middle school, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. But you charge a portion because it's not only available for the community, it's also available for your normal co-curricular activities, and you cannot charge your normal co-curricular time during the school day to a recreation fund. So you'll see an increase in the recreation fund, which is a nice problem to have. In the food service fund, we have a revenues over expenditures ending the year with a fund balance of about $32,000. When we did our original budget, we really didn't know where it was going to land, to be honest with you. This is our, based on our most recent numbers, and I shared the revenue numbers with you earlier when you approved Chartwell's. By having some of the changes we made, you'll see a little bit of a decline in revenue. We're able to actually now have the food service fund take their share of some of the costs, like custodial and other costs that in the past they weren't able to do because they didn't have a bottom line that was able to suffice. So they have a $32,000 fund balance that we expect will go up next year as we now have our staff in place for a full year. That is the slowest I can talk, or maybe fastest about budget amendment 1.
Comments or questions? Mr. O'Connor.
So once again, just for clarity here, $74 million budget. Mr. Bart was once again phenomenal with coming within $36,000. He's going to be sorely missed in this district. Although I must say, it doesn't beat your record of 2 years ago when you came within $102.
No, it's not here yet. We may hit it, but somebody else will hit it.
Phenomenal
This is a lot more than Steve Bart. It's all our directors and our staff and people turning off lights and computers when they should. So, we really push, on expenditures. And, we can only control revenue so much. But, where we can control expenditures, really push really hard. Any other questions on Amendment 1? This will come back to the board on the 29th for approval.
Questions? Okay, well, obviously, if anybody thinks of questions, shoot them Mr. Barr's way, and he will get the information out to all the rest of us before the next meeting. Okay, next is our 17-18 original budget. Dr. Matthews.
And Mr. Barr is excited to present a budget to us based on some unknowns at this point. Mr. Barr.
So we were hoping that by having these later meetings that we would receive a budget by now. As Mr. O'Connor said, we've had many meetings late in June. There's been 2 of the last 5 years we were done by mid-June. That we had budgets, and just about every year we've had a budget by June 1st. This time we don't have a budget from the state by June 1st, and they're home for the weekend, or they're done for the weekend after passing the MIPSERS reform. We won't get opinionated about that, but the budget will not be any earlier than next week sometime from the state. So we do our best guess on what we think is going to happen. They have a conference, so the Senate does their thing, the House, the governor. We had this whole MIPSERS thing hanging out there that we weren't going to work on until they weren't going to work on the budget until something happened there, and there was that's been resolved now to their liking, but maybe not to our liking, but that's how it goes. Then they put a conference committee report out without the governor's input, which a conference committee is like a compromise between the House and the Senate. But I think they wanted to meet a deadline. I'm not sure the numbers really mean a lot, but we'll see what happens by the time the governor gets involved, and they will actually come out with something they can vote on. They're hoping it was going to be today, but it didn't happen, so the earliest I think they're back is next Tuesday. So, but as I said, that's not the only estimate we have. You still estimate children and the number of FTEs. So I think as long as we take care of our own business, which is making sure we have quality programs in the district and quality support, then everything will land in the right place. So for the general fund, here's our challenges we face, and I will tell you these challenges have been here just about every year I've been here. We have a foundation allowance cut of $470 that has still not been restored. We have funds that have been diverted from the school aid fund to community colleges, higher ed, and the general fund. The community colleges, I believe, we're going up almost $200 million, but they will be fully funded from the school aid fund. Not what we talk about with the taxpayers, hear about in the community. They didn't expect that when we voted on proposal over 20 years ago. There's been corporate tax cuts that haven't helped us. There's been road funding issues. There's obviously the city of Detroit, or Detroit schools really. We have the Flint issue and the retirement system obligations. Really the change in retirement they passed today really doesn't address our current problem on our defined benefit plan, but so I think there's still an issue with that. This is a comparison, and we skip a few years, but it goes back to 7, 8, 8, 9, and then we jump a few years to 14, 15, and then all the way through the current year. You can see in 17, 18, I have an estimate in here of about $65 per student increase. Where it's going to land, we will see. But and we also have an increase in the MIPSERS cost offset. That is not 147C, it's 147A. I really think that will land. So when they raised our retirement rate about 3/4, 1%, because the investment returns aren't as good, they could have just stuck us with it, but they're giving us some revenue in return, which we've had for the last several years. So the way you read this report, again, you've seen this before, is the first 2 lines are the pupil counts, and then you get a foundation. So back in 7, 8, we just had a foundation, the 3rd line, of 874, through we get 20J of 281. So we were at 9,024. In 8, 9, the foundation went up $56. So we are up 9,080. You can see those NAs, those things didn't apply back then. Then in 14, 15, there was a cut, and they said, well, to get some of it back, you can do some of these things. Best practices, good performance, blah, 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 blah. We won't go through them all. And we ended up now $448, $448 down now compared to the previous year. You don't see the 13, 14, but so I didn't want to have the schedule way too small. But I'm trying to show you a comparison way back to when it was the highest, which was 8, 9. So as you compare to 8, 9, for our 17, 18, we are still $262 per student less than our high mark of 8, 9. Not taking into account the money that they're putting into the retirement system that goes in and comes out. So we're $262 per student less, guys, to use for students than 8, 9. I mean, think about that. I mean, yet we brought you 2 proposals that you approved for bargaining agreements that were ratified, and we have 2 other ones that we have tentative agreements on that we'll talk about later. That, again, we're taking care of our own business, running great programs, running a great district that is attracting students. Large source of revenue is obviously state aid. Just to go back one page, if you look at that third line, 8,553 or 848 for this year, just to recall, the state does not fund all of that money. A large amount, not large, but about $3,000 in change comes from local taxpayers. So we have our hold harmless millage, which is applied, that you approved last board meeting millage rate to homesteads. It's about 2.7, 2.8 mils. That money is part of the $8,500 and something dollars. The non-homestead millage of just under 18 mils reduced because of Headley, that is part of it also. So really the amount we're getting from the state is about, over $3,000 less than that. And that's just how the proposal is written. Okay, so as proposal, as property taxes go up because millages, the values go up, then the amount the state has to pay us goes down. When we had the recession a few years ago, as the property tax values went down, the revenue we received from property taxes went down, the state had to pay more. So thank goodness that we have a good economy right now with the property taxes going up. So state aid is 62% and property taxes are 26%. I would contend you could put a large part of those together, and that's contingent upon our kids. That's what. So that's our driver of our revenue. Obviously, our students. We get a little bit of money from federal grants, and then a little bit of other money that we've spoken about with local revenues, especially and county special ed. Our expenditure assumptions for the 17-18 year are. We have an increase of 2 general education teachers, and that is to maintain class sizes or reduce in some cases. We have an increase of 1.5 teachers in the English language learner area. And we have now, with the retirement that Ms. Diglio brought to you tonight, 17 teacher retirements. I think that's the most we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. In the salary area, we have tentative agreements with all of our groups. NEA and NASA we'll talk about later. NESPA and NTA you approved tonight. We also have a placeholder in the budget for amount for merit pay. Still obviously to be determined how that will be distributed and what the guidelines will be. But we have a placeholder of a couple $100,000 in the budget for merit pay. So this budget you're seeing tonight, that you'll see in a minute, includes merit pay and all of those agreements. Okay, even though you haven't ratified NEA or NASA, the money is in the budget for those. And if you don't ratify, then we'll take it out at another time. Retirement rate's about 37.5%. We pay about 25.5%. And the other portion, that 12%, is that 147C in and out. We obviously have FICA. You can see all our insurances, which average 16% of payroll. And then, as we've spoken about before, we've adopted the NGSS earlier than most districts, RJ. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair.
So the board's made the commitment to do that. You've obviously had many presentations from Emily Plonsky and group. So we put science kits in this year in grades 5 and 6, and that's expanding to other elementary grades next year. Science textbooks and workbooks you adopted, and some of that was last year's budget, some of it is the New Year's budget. And then we've spoken about athletics in the past, where we're able to offer a few more sports now as district funded versus fully parent funded.
Before we move off of expense assumptions, there's been a lot in the news lately about changing the funding for teachers for retirement, and changing the amount for 401k contributions. Is that, well, obviously hasn't passed, but
Right.
do you have an estimate of how that might impact our budget?
We don't know yet because they are estimating, there's a 401k component or defined contribution. There's this new hybrid plan.
Yeah.
They're actually guessing that 40-something% will pick the hybrid plan, and the rest will pick the defined contribution. I haven't even seen the definition of the hybrid plan is, so we've not been given anything with what the rates will be. I go backwards, Dennis?
It's the other way around.
Okay, so
The
more
estimate is 60% on the 401k.
Okay, thank you.
Based
We have
on,
not seen any
based on the
numbers.
proposal.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. We have not seen any numbers yet in terms of how that would affect our percentage that we're paying into that 37.5%.
Okay.
We currently have 7 different rates that we pay,
Right,
because we have not, I'm sure there'll be at least 2 more.
right,
We haven't seen anything yet.
okay.
I think the way it's written for the 401k is 4%
Right,
is paid for from the state coffers, and then we match up to 3%.
right, right.
But I don't know how that could affect the defined benefit plan. Because you have less people paying into that, what's happening to that rate? So it's all got to get calculated. So truly, the retirement rate doesn't change until October for the state's fiscal year. So right now, it's a guess, obviously.
Thank you.
Expenditures, as we've spoken about, salaries and benefits make up about 85% of our budget. Purchase service about 9%. Supplies, it really includes utilities, are in supplies and purchase services. Almost 2% for students that we send out to be educated in other districts like Farmington, Hazel Park, Bloomfield, Birmingham, so on and so forth. This is a summary of our general fund budget. This is, again, taking into account those assumptions, including all the tentative agreements on the 4 bargaining units. Is the budget amendment 1 you just saw. The next column is the original budget. This is showing a $641,000 increase using the assumptions you saw earlier, which also included a 40 student increase we didn't mention. You're also seeing an increase in expenditures. A large portion of that is obviously from the salaries. The salary portion of the $1.8 million is about $1.2 million. And then by the time you add retirement and FICA to it, you're over $1.6 million. So it's obviously almost all from collective bargaining agreements, along with employees who are not represented by a union or an association. So we made obviously an intentional decision, as we spoke with the board about, that we've had this 10% guideline, unofficial policy, that we're sitting here at about 13%. When this year is over in 17-18, using the assumptions that we have, assuming we receive the revenue we talked about and those expenditures fall where they are, and assuming we don't get any big surprises on MIPSers,
Right.
we would end the year just over 11% as you calculate fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, or about 12% if you exclude that $4-point-something million of 147C. So that's just for the current year. You'll see a couple more years out in a moment. Revenue, again, here's your breakdowns. Your local revenue goes up because the property tax values go up. The net average in the city was about 3.3%. State goes up because our students go up, and we have an increase in the foundation. Incoming transfers, we actually have a decline. The biggest reason for the decline is actually the number of special ed students that we've had in this district have declined significantly. And I believe when Ms. Hoppenstedt was here, she spoke about in the MTSS and the 504s. We've had a significant decline, I think about 20 to 25% in the number of special ed students identified as special ed. That now many of them are identified as 504. The special ed millage is based on special ed costs. 504 students, so to speak, kids that receive accommodations, not classified as needing special needs. Those costs now transfer to what's a non-special ed cost. The special ed millage is distributed based on your percentage of the county total of special ed costs. So as our special ed population goes down and our costs go down to a point, our percentage of that pot is going down. I'm not sure there's very many districts, Dr. Weber, that are having a decline and moving kids to the 504 and the MTED that we are in this district based on our whole continuum of services.
Yeah, and the declension is not only in the 504 part, but the building of a true birth to 26 system of early identification with students and families who need IEPs as well.
Right.
And you saw a little bit of evidence with that with our CPAC group tonight, and hearing the parents speak of the relationship they have with their student services department, how that's working out. So it's an accurate statement, Mr. Barr.
So it's a good problem to have, but it was still it was about a $250,000 decrease, and then we spoke earlier about selling buses and trucks. That was something that happened in 16-17. We don't expect anything significant like that in 17-18.
Going back to the special ed, is it the reclassification of kids from IEPs to 504s that's causing it? Do we have the same number, approximately the same number of kids total with 504s and IEPs, or is it just the reclassification, fewer kids with IEPs and more kids with 504s,
That's a
or are
big
we
part
using
of
it
it.
all together?
I don't know the numbers in total, but I know that our special ed FTEs is down about 25 students, and I'm not sure, 25 FTEs, mind you. I'm not sure exactly how many 504s we have, but some are going from
128.
a special ed IEP to no 504, no nothing. So, again, those 504s are not part of the funding formula
Yeah.
for it. So, we're still serving as many kids, just in a different model. Mr. Town, do you have a question? Okay. Expenditures, a lot of numbers. Goes up to 1.8 million. You can see these are categorized by what's called a functional category based on the Michigan School Accounting Manual. Basic programs are your traditional K-12 general ed programming. Not ELL, not special ed, those are under added needs. So you can see that's instructional, ed needs instructional. A great majority, obviously, of our salaries in this district are instructional and NEA, which is why you're seeing increases in those categories. When you go down under non-instructional, even though they call them non-instructional, we have a lot of NEA staff that provide service to students in the pupil service area or in the instructional support service area. They're just not in a classroom. It's outside the traditional classroom. So a lot of those numbers you're seeing, larger numbers, a great majority of that is from the NEA numbers. And again, that's salary and retirement FICA increases along with benefits. When you see school administration, we've spoken before about when we had a principal, when Ms. Burnham left, or is leaving in a few weeks, from being a contract employee to now having an employee in-house that costs a little more money, along with the some compensation changes. And then just everything else is really just pretty much carrying over with some adjustments as necessary. Sometimes in maintenance operations, when we get utility updates from our consultant on energy, we have to adjust some of our utility costs. So we are up, again, we're up $1.8 million in expenditures, up about $600,000 in revenue. Going forward into past 17-18, just a few projections right now are, and the way you read this is the $74,974,000 for 17-18 carries forward to the top of the next column. We then have an increase in students that generates $170,000. And that is right now based on just 20 students. And we don't have anything built in for the foundation allowance for those 2 years because, listen, we don't have a budget for this year yet. It's kind of hard to project for 18-19. So we have a slight increase in our revenue in future years. And hopefully there'll be more as we go. Expenditures, things that change from 17-18 going forward. We project that we'll have 10 retirements each of the next 2 years. Based on the enrollment numbers, I've projected we would have an increase of 2 more teachers, so that's increase in teaching staff. The hard cap, which is the increase in the medical insurance based on the medical CPI. Science kits, we talked about science kits, science textbook, those fluctuate year to year depending which grades are migrated, except not all done at once. So you can see our expenditures actually in this case are pretty steady, and you'll see later when we talk about the NEA contract, which is really for 17-18 only, why you're seeing kind of a flat number there. But again, the reason we're able to do some compensation in some cases is this big number right here when we have a large number of retirements in the teacher ranks. So our summary.
Do you have a question?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I forget, is it 60,000 in savings every time somebody retires?
About 55 now because sometimes we have a higher teacher
you're
with steps.
projecting 10 retirements next year and the year after,
Yeah.
right?
And the reason why is because we're having to hire some teachers with steps now, where in the past we haven't had to do that, just based on the shortage.
It's fine.
Not too many, Mr. Go's pretty
Yeah, no,
tough.
but I just wondered.
About 55,000.
Yep.
Yeah. Our projection then, going out 2 more years, based on those numbers we just looked at, if you just go to the very bottom, you can see our fund balances ending next year, about a year from now, at 11% from the second line from the bottom, the year after at 10.5%, and the year after at 10%. Or you can look at it the way I look at it a lot of times, which is backing out the 147C. and you're up about 0.5 to 0.75%. You can look at it either way you want to look at it. I don't want to call it 2 sets of books, it's just 2 calculations. And again, the biggest thing is for the NEA group, we have compensation increase in there for 17-18, but not any years thereafter. Any questions on the general fund? We still have 2 hours left on budget. No? Oh, that's my jokes tonight.
Mr. Cook?
A couple of things. In the beginning, for when you were talking about the foundation allowance, you were talking an increase of 40 students.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you did your budget numbers down here further, you were talking an increase of only 20 students.
20 for 18-19.
For 18-19, but you had 40 in
For 17-18. Up here, 17-18 we have 40, and then the year thereafter we have 20. For 18-19.
And then the last statement flew by so fast. You said that your last statement, you said that you don't have the negotiated NEA increases in for 18-19
right here. Right, and you'll hear it later. We really have a wage reopening for the second year for 18-19. That's correct. And you'll hear that later on in executive or closed session. Any other questions on the general fund? Again, these numbers shouldn't be real surprising. I think most of you have seen these numbers. Just really didn't have the negotiated numbers until the last few days. Okay, recreation fund. We really don't have any large projects now for the expenditures plan that would really be recreation fund eligible. So you'll see an increase in the revenue because our property taxes are going up, and our expenditures are going down because we don't have a significant project that we would charge here. So you'll see our fund balance going up quite a bit. It gives us the opportunity to the district in the future to have some capital projects that could be things that help the community. Again, you can't charge a whole program there. Actually, you can charge a whole program here if you wanted to. Take that back. If it's 100% for the community and not something, let's say, the school, that is also used co-curricular-wise or during the school day. It's only for the part that it's not available during the school day, but it has to be available for the entire community. So there is the ability or the opportunity here to do something with the recreation monies in the future as the board sees fit that makes sense with this fund balance. And again, the same thing happened before. When I got here, it was accumulating, and then we started spending money on some pretty large capital projects, including tennis courts that we spoke about, the track, football field, so on and so forth. That could include, for example, redoing some playgrounds at schools, and a portion of that goes to the recreation fund, a portion can be picked up by sinking fund or the bond if there's money there. So that's just a high-level summary of the recreation fund. Food service fund, we would have an increase based on these numbers and based on what the board approved earlier today of about $50,000 in the fund balance to end next year at about $83,000. So that was our whole purpose. We're going on the uptick now to try and get our food service fund to fund balance, but our goal was not to build a large fund balance in food service fund. Our goal is for that to really be a sustainable fund, a standalone fund. There's no reason to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in here when you have a bond that can pay for food service equipment when you need it or things like that. That is the end of the presentation on the 17-18 budget.
Are there questions from the board? Other questions?
At the next meeting, we will have the budget hearing, which includes the tax rate, which you've already seen. We will also have the same presentation. We won't go through it all, but there will be a budget book that will break down, here's everything that makes up local revenue, for example. Here's everything that makes up state revenue, kind of line by line by line. That goes in a small budget book that we make available to the community a few days before the June 29th meeting. And that'll be available online and also in the lobby here.
People think of additional questions after this thing, how I can fire
Feel
them
free
off.
to text, email, my email.
Okay.
Still work, so.
Wonderful.
Okay?
All right, if there's nothing further, I know you're up next with our maintenance vehicles.
Oh, man.
Dr.
Okay.
Matthews?
Mr. Barr.
Let me go sit. You don't need me up here.
Okay, we have Mr. Barr, along with our maintenance director, Mike Dragoo. They have reviewed our maintenance vehicles, been determined that due to condition, age, reliability, and mechanical history, We need to add one salt truck and one plow truck, and one salt truck should be removed from the fleet. And so the attached memorandum from Mike Dragoo clearly explains the need to purchase the new snowplow truck. The new trucks would replace ones purchased in 2000 and 2006. And so I'll let Mr. Barr continue.
Okay. Briefly, as Dr. Matthews said, this is the replacement of 2 vehicles that are really used. In the wintertime, thank goodness we had a pretty mild winter this last year. When we got here, when this cabinet got here, we had a pretty messed up fleet. Trucks that were breaking down, oil leaking, and just amazing the things were happening. We do, just people ask me, how do you assess what we need? We do a needs assessment no matter what it is, whether it's textbooks, right, Dr. Weber, we assess that. We assess athletics, we assess our buildings, we assess technology, we assess our buses, and we assess our vehicles. We have bought many buses that have not been the oldest ones because they're performing better. It's not always about useful life, it's about performance. We have a vehicle here that is from 2000 that we're replacing. That's okay. It's only got about 45,000 miles on it going forward and about 30,000 miles going backwards. Because you ever been in a truck with them in the middle of the night, like I have, they go forward and they just go backwards, forward and backwards all night. So that's, obviously that's quite a wear on the transmission. So the review of all the maintenance equipment is done. We've done this, and we have a replacement plan out for the next 5 or 6 years for all vehicles, whether it's buses or maintenance vehicles. And the recommendation is to replace 2 vehicles, as Dr. Matthews said, a salt truck and a snowplow truck. And the difference is, obviously, the snowplow truck doesn't have a salt thing in the back, a salt catch in the back. These are not things that we can pay for from the bond. It is not allowable. We can't make it allowable. It's not allowable by law. We are able to work off bids through the Macomb County municipal bid that we've done many times, and also through the state of Michigan's My Deal bid, which is a cooperative bid through the state of Michigan, just like it sounds. And we would buy either the accessories like the plows, or we buy the actual trucks themselves. The cost of these equipped vehicles is $93,086 that we would purchase from Signature Ford, NBC Truck Equipment, and Truck and Trailer Specialties. And again, we built our budget that you just saw, assuming these are coming out of the general fund. We always have some money in there for the general fund. This year we would have, the coming year, we'd have 2 vehicles in there instead of 1. So that is the information. There's called memos behind from Mr. Dragoo that summarizes kind of what he's recommending with F-350s. Mr. Cook, I don't think they're aluminum F-350s, if they would make aluminum F-350s.
Not yet.
Okay. So, this is the recommendation to the board that we would hope could be approved at the June 29th meeting, and they would receive those in time, probably by around Thanksgiving, in time for hopefully our first snow in like January.
Okay, Mr. Cook?
Gas or diesel?
These are gas. We've all these are gas. I'll ask why. I'm not sure why. I don't remember yet. I knew you were going to say that. Should I have thought about that? We have diesel buses and we have gas of these.
Because of the wear and tear in the transmission plowing?
Yeah.
Could you
I will
verify that?
And I'll check with
also
mechanics. So, yeah.
Verify transmission too, because about 2013, 2014, they changed the transmissions into gas.
Okay. So gas versus diesel, and then
Transmission.
what kind of transmission it is?
What transmission it has.
Okay, no problem. I will check with Mr. Dragoo, who couldn't be here tonight, and we will speak with our mechanics, who in the last couple of years, we purchased a couple of gas ones, and they've performed very well, but it doesn't mean you don't look at it.
Yeah.
So I will ask our mechanics for the feedback. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll look for that answer before it comes back to us.
Absolutely. And Mr. Dragoo will probably come to that meeting on the 29th to address it.
Okay, excellent. Any additional comments or questions about our need for snowplow trucks? Okay, we'll move on to item D of our information discussion, contract renewals. Dr. Matthews.
There are 3 contract renewals or 3 contract issues that we're bringing to the board tonight. The first is our administrative contracts, which expire on June 30th, 2017. And it's recommended that the superintendent be authorized to extend the following administrative contracts, and we have a list of them for you for 2 years, and then one elementary principal contract will be extended for 1 year. And there's no salary increase noted yet because this is a group that is, it's not a union, but it's an association, and we have reached an agreement with that association that we'll be presenting to you this evening. And so if that would be voted on June 29th, which would affect these administrators because they're in that association. The second is 2 assistant superintendent contract renewals, superintendent for academics and assistant superintendent for human resources. It's recommended that their contract also be extended for 2 years and that they receive a 1.5% salary increase. They're not included in the other administrative contracts because they actually are part of the group that negotiates with that association, and so they're not included in that settlement. And then the third is superintendent contract extension. The current contract between the school district, Board of Education, and the superintendent states that the board at its sole discretion will vote whether to extend the contract for an additional 2 years during the second year of the contract. And this is the second year of the contract between the Board of Education and the superintendent. And so the contract period the current contract is for the period of July 1, 2015 through June 30th of 2018. So the recommendation would be that you would extend the contract 2 years through 19 and 20, and that the superintendent would receive a salary increase as well. And so those are the 3 contract extensions that or renewals that we're bringing to the board that we would ask you to vote on June 29th.
Comments or questions, Mr. Nutter?
Yeah, Dr. Matthews, in February I sent you an email about the administrative contracts, and you had promised to have this to us in the mid-March agenda. Unfortunately, it's not showing up till now. And the problem I have with that is state law says that if we don't handle this issue 90 days before, if we don't alert anybody that their contracts aren't going to be extended, they all automatically get a 1-year increase. So in essence, the decision is taken out of the hands of the board. And, this board has oversight responsibilities for the district. So, I'm honestly disappointed because in essence, here's a situation that I think we should have some decision in, and it's been completely taken out of our hands. And I know that you're familiar with the 90-day rule because we've had this discussion in the past. So could you enlighten me and maybe explain what happened here and why we ran into this situation?
We were entering into negotiations with NASA. There were no administrators whose performance would indicate that they shouldn't be renewed for an additional year at least, and so that was the reason they were not brought earlier in the year.
Okay, and I understand that, but understand in the future that that's still our decision. We still have to vote on this. So we would, the contract renewals then would come to the board well before the evaluations are complete, because the evaluations of administrators were not complete until the May-June period, and so we would have been asking you to extend contracts on employees whose evaluations had not been complete. That if you extend them 2 years, next year we could bring them back in June, which would be well before, it would be based on their evaluation, would be well before we would need to notify them that we were not renewing, and so we would get in a rotation as we move forward that would allow the board to exercise their oversight. Yeah, and this wouldn't be a problem. I mean, if we stayed on the 2-year rotation as we used to previously, this wouldn't be a problem, because if we could delay the vote, let's say till August or September of 2018, and we'll continue rolling an extra year each year, and we have enough time to look at the evaluations. Which brings me to my second point. I think I had sent you a couple emails requesting a copy of the administrator evaluation. You've been kind enough to share that with us in the past. I think that it's something that we're entitled to see, and as well, this is part of the work that you're evaluated on as well. Do you have any intention to share that with us? Or is there a change in policy?
They have just been completed this week as we speak, and so I can certainly share those with the board.
Okay, thank you. And then If I may, so those are my questions on, or my comments on the administrative contract, on the superintendent contract.
Before we move on to that, does anybody else have anything about the administrative contracts? Can we do that and then we'll
Sure.
move on? Okay, Mr. O'Connor.
Yeah, I'd like to request that the public relations communication specialist be pulled out for the next meeting for discussion.
So you would like to separate that discussion from the vote on
As
the
a
contract?
separate vote, yes.
I would support that for discussion.
We're not taking a vote on this particular thing right now, but we can discuss that about how we move forward with that at the next meeting. Did you have something to say? I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking of timing, so next time it comes up for approval, are you saying you want to vote on all of the contracts except that particular individual, and then you're going to do a vote on that individual's renewal separately? Is that your
That's my
intent?
request, that it be a
And-
separate vote,
okay.
yes.
Along with your comment about seeing the evaluations, the board holds the superintendent accountable, and the rest of the people work for the superintendent. So I believe you're asking for just pure information because we wouldn't have any input in terms of how they've been evaluated because they're not our employees. Is that correct, and why you want to look at them?
It doesn't matter why I want to look at them. I'm requesting the information, and it's been given to us all the time. I don't know why I'm being questioned.
She's just
Well, I
asking if
should
you're
have
asking
it.
for information, which you just said.
Sure, informational purposes.
Okay,
right?
just trying to understand.
And he's always been kind enough to share it with us,
I
though.
just-
I didn't know that they were included.
Okay, so you would like to see that for informational purposes, Mrs. Stevenson?
I guess I have a question about if this is the time that we need to discuss, why are we not discussing what Mr. O'Connor wants to discuss right now?
Well, over the past 3 or 4 years, as a board member, I've been forced to vote no on this because there were certain positions that I didn't support renewing. So I'm uncomfortable having this group think. I'd like to have that a separate vote and have it on the record. Rather than forcing me to vote no on all of those contract renewals when I support all of them but one. That's why I'd like to put that out, to separate that and have a separate vote.
I know that you supported that, Mr.
I support discussion of any and all contracts and in individual. I support any discussion that we would have.
Mr.
If I can, just for the sake of clarity, I mean, in this particular case, we're treating this as a consent item, and we don't really need a second for a board member to pull out. One board member wants to discuss it separately, vote on it separately. One board member could make that request.
Well, I'm going to state that if that is the case, that would not be something that I would be supportive of. I understand that we can do that. I think that to Ms. Slobinski's point, Dr. Matthews is the one we support. I also think that we're sending a pretty strange message to our administrators as we do that we are responsible for our administrators. So I'm just going to state for the record that I am not supportive of pulling that. Obviously, if that is according to the rules, that is permissible, which is what you're saying, Mr. Mena.
Absolutely, yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to thwart the rules, but I'm going to state very strongly that I don't believe that's a best practice at school boards to isolate individuals, especially individuals that are, we are not evaluating. We are not evaluating his work. We are, so to discuss that at the board table and discuss in a particular employee's work at the board table, I think that sets a precedent that is, I don't think that's a good precedent for us to set.
And we had this conversation back when we had our work session, and we talked about it, and at that point, I came to the realization, and I got clarity from the gentleman that came from NASB. So that's why I'm fine with the way it's stated tonight.
I will get clarification on the rules if we're allowed to just pull individual items from the contract. Mr. Mena says we are. I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I think we need some clarity on whether or not that is something that's permitted to pull that individual out. And certainly if that's something that is permissible, we have had a board member support and suggest it. So we will look at that at the next meeting. Dr. Matthews and I will seek some clarity on that, and then we'll move from there. All right, we are moving on to the assistant superintendent contract renewal. You had something that you wanted to add about that, Mr. Miller?
No, I actually had, well, I guess I have a similar comment. Could Dr. Matthews, I think, is part of the contract renewals for some of our bargaining units. We were giving them 1% increases, and we're asking for a 1.5% increase now for administrators. Can you just explain?
The bargaining units all included steps, and so when you calculate the steps plus the 1% that they receive, they actually receive a higher increase over the group than the 1.5%. They're between 2 and 3% overall, and so the administrator's actual contract is less than the groups that we have approved.
Thank you.
Any comments, of course, Mr. O'Connor?
How many people in those contracts get steps and the teacher's contract it's not? Everybody gets steps, is it?
In the teacher contract?
The teacher contract we're going to talk about in closed session in a moment. And the other, how many get steps? I don't know if Ms. Diglio or Mr. Barr knows the answer to that.
All of the units are on a step. The NEA goes up to 28 because we went to half steps. The only group that does not have steps are the administrators, and that would include the assistant superintendents, including all the other administrators, building level, coordinators, and directors.
So what percentage of our teachers union employees get steps?
72?
No, we have, if you look at it, really as 14 or 15 steps before you get to longevity, Mr. O'Connor. We have, give me 1 second, just put a number out, and I will tell you in a moment. There's 205, there's 200 and about 18 that are still on steps, like regular steps, 205 that are not. If you do the same for NESPA, or if you're asking for those two?
No,
just teachers? Okay, great.
So it's about 50%?
Approximately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, anything additional on that? Moving on to superintendent contract renewal. Any additional comments or questions about that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I recall we discussed when we had the renewal of the superintendent contract last time. There was some language change on it, and I agree with Dr. Matthews' assessment that we have a commitment to hold a vote now before the end of this fiscal year on whether or not to extend his contract for an additional 2 years. Dr. Matthews just told us that one of the reasons that he didn't bring these contracts for the administrators before us was because the evaluations were not completed. Now, again, I'm all about keeping our commitments, and so if we have to, we'll go ahead and take this vote. I personally think it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have a vote on a 2-year extension for a superintendent contract without yet having had an opportunity to complete his evaluation. So again, I fully respect the fact that the superintendent can hold us to this contractual commitment. I also think that he has the ability to waive it. I think it just makes a lot more sense for us to do this after we've had an opportunity to evaluate.
I would agree with that.
Mrs. Kuzinski.
We finished an evaluation late in 2016, am I correct, Dr. Matthews?
Yes.
And at that point, he was evaluated effective. 6 months later, the evaluation is due, but he was rated effective, and it does say in the contract that you renew it in the second year. So the last review wasn't that long ago, and I was comfortable going ahead and taking the vote on renewing his contract.
Well, it's up to him, so when it's down to a comfort level, I just think it would make sense, but again, I'm willing to keep whatever commitments we agreed to.
All right. All right, if there is nothing further, this is our second opportunity for comments from the audience. Seeing no one in the audience still at this late hour, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Given the lateness of the hour, the superintendent has no report.
I know we're going into closed session. Mr. Barr, you've spoken a lot tonight, so I'm going to suggest that you...
I have nothing else.
Okay. Dr. Weber, do you have any?
No.
Thing? And Ms. Stiglio, I know we'll be talking more with you at closed session as well. All right. Committee reports. Mrs. Kuzinski.
The Governance and Policy Committee has not met between June 1 and June 15th. We do have a meeting scheduled for July 13th from 5 to 7. If, in fact, we end up moving the board's self-evaluation that same day from 7 to 10, I would suggest that the Governance and Policy Committee look at another day to meet. I think an expectation of us doing our best work with those two meetings back to back, and the detail orientation of it is not in our best interest. So I'll be talking with the committee members about that.
Okay. And I don't know if everybody got my note. It looks like we have some additional conflicts, and I would like to know if people are available on the 13th so that we can figure out a date. I know Mr. Cook, you're on vacation. I'm not sure when you...
Up until, I'll be back that day, so I will be able to make it. So I will not be prepared for anything, but I will be able to make it.
Well, if you'll do the self-assessment online before you go.
Already done it.
You're all, I think you're good. Thank you. And I will get the agenda out to you so you have an opportunity to look at that. So, Mrs. Hood, just if you will check your calendar for that date and let me know as soon as possible, that would be great. And then we can all be together for the self-assessment, which would be very helpful. I have nothing further either with board communication, but Mrs.
I'm sorry, I know it's late, but I went to the project-based learning presentation for the ELL students at Parkview, and I just got to tell you, second graders really understand what's going on in the rainforest and whether or not dogs can live there. They know a lot of detail, and we have an incredible AV system that can do 360 with the microphone. If you haven't seen it demonstrated anywhere, that was really awesome, and great job in those ELL students that worked really hard. I was also at the Butterfly Garden ribbon cutting, and there was an article on the front page of the Novi News, and it was an excellent collaboration between our Novi High School art students as well as the gardening club at Novi Woods. And if you haven't had a chance to walk through it, it's not in a courtyard, it's the north end of the building of Woods, and it would be well worth your 5 minutes to go through there. I also went to Village Oaks to see this whole walkout where the seniors that are graduating walk through their elementary school and the kids clap them out. And I just want to say hats off to Nicole Carter. I think that was a great addition, and I think it's inspiring to our younger students, and anything that we can do to inspire them is great. Thank you.
I think it had a lot of parents in tears and teachers too that day, so that was a neat event. Mr. Mena.
Yeah, I got an email this week from a community member who's very much into broadcasting, and he just wanted to alert me that once again our radio station is down, and we're coming up to the end of the year, and I know usually we have something running automated on that, but there is a downside, potential downsides, a potential opportunity for losing our station if we don't continuously broadcast something on the air. So I'd appreciate it if somebody could look at that and make sure that that's up. The other thing I wanted to mention was, the kids seem to do a really nice job with Cat's Eye News this year. I am a little bit concerned. We spent a lot of money on equipment this year, and I'm seeing a lot of problems with what looks like to be problems with the teleprompters at the high school. I kind of laughed because I watched the last Cat's Eye News for the year, and one of the students who was on the show kind of looked disgusted at one point because the teleprompter stopped on him again, and he kind of had to pick up the paper and kind of had to find out exactly where he was at there. So I don't know really at this point.
I would hope if it's a functional problem that they would, it's under warranty. I mean, it's the first year, so I would hope they would they would contact the technology department for assistance.
I made that suggestion back in November in hopes that it would filter.
It's been that
up,
long on the
and,
teleprompter?
That's when I first saw it. in
Okay, I'll reach
November.
out to Ms. Yancey as well and ask her about it.
All right, additional board communication, Mr. O'Connor.
Next Wednesday night, Mrs. Globzinski is going to be honored at the OCSBA Awards Dinner for 12 years of service to this district. She will get a beautiful teacher's hat. So, and also I shared with the board tonight some data from goodcall.com, data that ranked Novi as the 12th best city in America for teachers. 13th best city in America for teachers, which I got to say again seems to cut against the narrative that we're having trouble attracting good people to our district, because we are one of the top in the nation in attracting and teachers living in Novi.
All right. We do have a need for executive session. Would entertain a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Stevenson, supported by Mrs. Globzinski. Mr. Mena, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Cook. Yes. Trustee Globzinski.
Yes.
Trustee Hood.
Yes.
Trustee Mena, yes. Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connor.
Yes.
Trustee Stevenson.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. We will move into executive session for the purpose of negotiations. We will not return to take any action other to adjourn after that time. Thank you.
Who seconded
Just-
that one?